When you say certified, who is doing that
The
certification?
Texas Commission on Fire Protection, the Texas agency.
Is that an agency that's separate from the fire marshal's office?
Yes, absolutely. They are the ones that certify, and it's interesting to note, at this very point in time, at the time that was going on, not only did we have Dauber starting to create a lot of turmoil in the scientific community, but we also had court cases that were developing in terms of what standards are we going to use to hold these individuals to testify. But again, I know shortly after 9/21, I started working, and the commission immediately started redoing all of their curriculum, because their curriculum, while it may have addressed this principle and this protocol and this procedure in the past, it didn't reference it in terms of 9/21.
Right.
So they had to go back and redo all that.
To what extent did you find that the protocols and principles and processes that were being followed by the fire marshal's office coincided with 9/21, or was this a new dawning day?
No, they were identical, if you will.
Because I think the perception that the public gets, and I think the media sometimes portrays, is that there were these two things going on. There was a bunch of really smart people developing 9/21, and then there was a bunch of bumpkin fire investigators off in their little world doing fire investigations. And while those two entities for a fair period of time were separated, would it be fair to say that there was a fair amount of intermingling of knowledge on that by 1991, to the point where 9/21 was not a total revelation?
Absolutely, and that's correct. But and I want to say this, and I'm speculating, it's opinion, but that's not to say there weren't some bumpkins out there that weren't following.
Sure.
But I want you to understand that as far as our jurisdiction, the state fire marshal back then, and most major city jurisdictions, Buddy can speak to that, were following the acceptable practices. They were obtaining the same training. The organizations like the International Association of Arson Investigators were putting out the training. They were doing it. One of the critical things in all of our jobs that we do today is the ability to pass down that scientific information, transform it down to the level where it's being used on a day-to-day basis.
I want to go back to the certification and help me with like a 3-sentence summary of what a fire investigator had to do back at that point to become certified.
He had to have at least 120 hours of training that was put on by acceptable trainers. Number one, certified trainers that were teaching a certified curriculum.
Okay, so he goes to classes. What else?
He goes to classes, and that was pretty much where he went.
And how does he achieve the certification? Does he have to take a test? Does he just have to finish the classes?
Yes, no, ultimately you have to take the test.
And what sort of a test was given?
That was based on, at the time, those were based on Mr. Kirk's book that had been published. They were based on various treatises that had been created by the scientific community, by the International Association of Arson Investigators, by NFPA, by NISA, by various organizations.
Did you take that test?
I never have. I'm not an arson investigator. I'm an attorney.
My condolences. What's changed since 1991 to now regarding certification? I mean, what would a fire investigator do today to get to that same certification?
About the same thing. About the same process.
Do you think that should change?
I'm not going to speculate that should change. I've worked with our folks. I've worked with a lot of individuals in the field, and I don't know that.
I'm not trying to put you in a bind here. Let me put it this way: If you got to build your perfect certification system, what else would you put in there?
You can't ever add too much training.
Well, give me a couple examples, though.
You know, you want to say 120 hours plus, and I say this, and I'll probably get in trouble with my boss, there is something to be said. I'll probably get in trouble with a lot of people on this. There is something to be said about an individual who's required to have a college degree, okay? And we probably all know individuals that have college degrees and can't milk a cow, you know, put gas in their car. But there is something to be said as a generality that you have completed a process, you've completed an ability, you've shown, you've demonstrated some ability to write better, to maybe comprehend alternative points of view better. That could be an addition, you know,
And
2 years of you know, writing.
And that's not an unusual standard in a lot of other forensic fields, is it?
No. It's not.
What about like continuing education after the certification to keep education?
Yeah,
I mean,
and again, when I'm talking about this, we're not, Texas is not a capital state. We probably lead the nation in a lot of areas. And in Texas, for the most part, when I talk about our guys, they're all required to be both T-Close certified and commission certified. In order
To help people in their own T-Close certified means he's a peace officer.
He's a peace officer. And there's good reasons for that, why we've moved in that direction. But each one of those requires continuing education. Each one of those.
That certification is renewed how often?
Every year. Every year. Yeah, it's renewed annually, and the continuing legal education requirement's 20 hours in each. Our folks average 48. Our folks average 10 years experience. We've got some 20, we've got, you know, some, but the average is 10.
All right. That's great at the state level at the fire marshal's office. What was the experience level and the presence of certification at the local level? I know that we had
It'd be the same.
It would be the same?
It'd be the same.
Do the same certification process?
It's the same certification process.
So if you want to be a fire investigator associated with the fire department for the city,
Of course, again, you have to take the 120 hours, you have to take the same course issued by the.
was the individual, was
Yes,
he was certified?
they were certified.
Go ahead.
Can I ask I want to ask a technical question about the presentation, because I know Dr. Byler has to leave, I think, at 2. So I'd like to address some of the, a couple of technical issues. You had a slide, and it's not there at the moment, but it showed essentially a floor plan of the building.
Yes, ma'am.
And there was a blue highlighted area.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you say that was the area where they observed the patterns, or where they believed the accelerant was on the floor?
Pattern area.
Pattern area.
Pattern area.
Those were the burn pattern areas.
That's what they deemed suspicious, if you will.
Okay, but to distinguish the two, those were the patterns, rather than that they believed the accelerant was on the floor. And then at the porch towards the entry of the
It
building.
extended out towards that area.
Right, and the positive chemical test was
It's
found,
at the very end of that.
right, it was on the porch, correct?
No, it was inside.
Right, but right by the
Part
door
of the house,
sill?
yes.
Okay. And how many pieces of evidence were removed from the residence and tested?
That was the only one taken from that spot. As best of my recollection, there was one other one taken from there back further, and there were, I think, at least 6 that were taken in the room, at least.
Right, in the room where they
In
believe
the room
where the
where they
origin
believe-
of the fire was.
Or-
That would be the logical place. You
Yes.
don't have to be a fire investigator to
Yes.
figure that out. So when they removed evidence from the bedroom where they believed the fire had started, those tests were negative, understanding that there are reasonable explanations why tests are negative after the fact, but the others were all negative. Okay.
Following up on something you said when she asked about the sample that was taken from the porch area, did you say that it was inside of the house?
Well, it wasn't on the porch,
So the threshold,
it was on the threshold.
So if the door is closed, where is the sample?
Right underneath,
Underneath the door?
right underneath.
Okay, so I didn't want to be clear that it wasn't literally inside of the house. It was under,
It would be underneath.
got it. That's what I thought, okay.
We all know there were no written standards in 1991, or you allege that. When did the written standards come, we were established in 45?
Yeah.
Can we have a copy of that?
Well, in 92 was the first publication.
Not 921, your written standards.
We don't,
Your SOP.
our SOPs? Our SOPs, we have a current one. I don't know, we have records retention schedules. I wouldn't begin to think that I don't have an SOP that I can provide you that was used in 1991.
Could you
I could-
at
I
least
could
conduct
probably
a search and give us an answer?
Look
as
for
to
one,
whether
but
those two-
I doubt, we'll have something like that. We have pretty strict record retention schedules and things like that are not going to be kept.
Would you be willing, though, to conduct a
Absolutely.
search and just
Absolutely.
send us a written answer whether they do or don't exist?
In conjunction with the commission.
Thank you.
Could we have a copy of your files?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Me?
Can you, if you have a copy here, otherwise email it to Lee?
Yeah, I left her with 2 printouts that have the entire, whole printout, so she can give them to you more rapidly.
How does the State Fire Marshal's Office disseminate changes in scientific standards or principles of fire investigation?
Well, primarily it's done through our training, obviously, our individuals. But I might say, we try and send them to the best available training that's out there. Now, and I ain't saying this, but the reality of it is that sometimes those trainings are very expensive. But I might add, we have attended training that was put on by Dr. Donna. I personally just went to one, and numerous of our individuals went to one that was put on by Mr. Lantini. So we try, as members, most of our guys are either members of what, North Texas Central or what? North Texas Fire Investigators Association that are affiliates with the IAAI, which is the national organization. And those training seminars, again, I was talking about how we disseminate the information from the scientific community down, how we get that down. They're pretty much, it's all certification process too that goes all the way down. And Texas isn't alone in this process. I mean, it's pretty much, this is all done basically on a national standard basis.
Does the Fire Marshal's Office itself produce training?
Very little for other folks. That's an area where Sunset has requested that we provide that in areas, but again, you have communities that will have, most of the larger communities, and I say that, let's say Corsicana, way back then, they had their own certified folks. But there are other communities that don't. Now, we're not authorized necessarily to provide that certification training. That's done primarily through the TEACS program. TEACS is the one that's pretty much the authorized individual that does the training. We do have and participate in an annual conference that we put on, State Fire Marshal's Conference, that we put on that is attended by well over 200, approaching 300 now. Very successful, where we bring in education. We do have an annual conference here that is put on, an arson conference that is put on, that has some of the best experts in the world that comes in and talks to statewide individuals that come in and offers them training. As far as our office itself, we have internal peer review process that we use on cases where the guys get together, as a team with their supervisors, and they go over, here's what I found, discussing new techniques, anything that has come up. Some guy's got something new, finds out, the word spreads. But it's primarily through external education.
When a fire investigator conducts an investigation and writes his report, back in 1991, how would his work be reviewed by his agency?
To be honest with you, I do not know.
Okay,
When
switched it today then.
When I came in, again, as I said, I came in 94, in August of 94, and that was one of the first things that we installed.
It was peer reviewed?
Was a peer review. The
So
supervisor.
describe how that works now.
Well, back then, what was done was the report came in, and a lot of it was driven by other factors. I don't want to be so altruistic to say we were doing it just to improve quality. But there was definitely a movement to improve quality. But what was happening a lot of times, we get a tremendous number of open records reports. And as a result of that, somebody has to read them. Somebody has to read them and go back and review these cases. I was the someone that was doing that. And as a result of that, I was looking at them and I was saying, this is not good, this is not good. Got together with the head of staff and we started a process. We were saying no report was going to be marked final, available for open records until the supervisors looked at it, checked at it, gone back. We weren't telling them what to say, we were telling them fill in the blanks.
Well, and that's kind of a standard practice for a lot of police agencies who
Done.
have supervisors reviewing offense reports. So you're saying this process began in '94?
I can't say for sure that the process wasn't there in terms of what the supervisors were doing. I know my participation in it and the structure that we did came in '94.
And I assume then that you would agree that that's a pretty critical task to have in an agency for quality control.
Yep.
And give me an example of the kinds of things you can notice and fix by just having that.
Well, one of the main ones is again, I always put it jumping from A to C with leaving B out. You know, you're leaving your conclusions. I think one of the first things we're looking at is the individuals over here has challenged the report because it didn't say we looked at all of these hypotheticals, the potential for having, the ceiling fan. Referred to the potential for having electrical. If you don't articulate it and you don't write it out and spell it out, you're leaving yourself subject to attack. What's more, if you leave it out and you start testifying it later on, testifying in court later on, you're putting yourself in even more trouble. So that was one of the concepts we tried to get across, and it wasn't that those concepts weren't there. I'm not saying they just weren't there. It's just we started more of a movement to develop it in a more formatted situation. There was a lot going on back there during this time. I mean, we had Supreme Court that was looking at dogma cases, that was looking at one of the biggest ones, I don't recall, it was in '99, I believe it was, where they actually said, wait a minute, Dauber is going to apply. It's just not for the scientific community. It's for technical community too. It's for any specialty. You hold yourself knowledgeable, and we're going to hold your feet to the fire, and you're going to show us how you're a specialist.
Well, wouldn't you agree that that kind of review could also perhaps speed along the process by which we discard scientific grounds that have been proven to be inappropriate? So, for example, back in '91, if an investigator used crazing of glass as a factor to determine whether something was arson, he likely, assuming there was no peer review back then, he didn't have somebody catching that and changing it before it became an offense report and used in court. Whereas nowadays, I'm assuming if you were doing a peer review of an offense report and saw the mention of crazed glass as a contributing circumstance to think this was arson, you'd stop that.
And I say yes, but there's a certain caveat that I would put in. Back in '91, had we looked at that and said crazed glass, you would take it for what it was.
Right.
It's in 921 now. It was back in literature back then.
Right.
So was Spalding. There was a lot of literature that carried all of these, and mind you, the new science in most instances, particularly in flashover, doesn't say, okay, this has totally changed. I mean,
But the crazing is, I think we all agree, crazing is out, right?
It's out.
If crazing was in a report that came to you today, What reaction would you have to it?
Why are you putting it in there? You know, why are you subjecting yourself to this?
Well, it might even lead to further questions like, where have you been?
And where have you been? Right.
But do you continue to review those reports?
I review many reports.
Do you see an improvement
Absolutely.
over time?
Absolutely. But you know what? I still the same. You know, it's a process. It's a process. Some are better than others. And it's honest to God truth. Some are better than others. And we work with those that need improvement. And you know, you scratch your head and you work towards the improvement. We're always trying to figure out ways how to improve. And again, you know, if there's anything in terms of the scientific method, you know, we welcome it. We absolutely welcome as much as possible. And again, I was talking about training. You know, there's a couple of classes that the International Association puts on, you know, big, good, beautiful training classes, last a week long. Those are $700 and $900 to attend in Boca Raton, Florida, or San Diego, California. For me to send my staff for a week, transportation, hotels, you know, food, meals, and things. I don't think the governor or the citizens of Texas are going to like me spending my money that way.
Actually, I think they probably would.
Yeah.
You know,
They probably kick in for it.
I have a question for you. Please help me to clarify. The expert hired by this commission has concluded that there is no scientific basis to call this an arson.
I don't think he's...
He basically says that it would have been undetermined. And Dr. DeHaan also has agreed that he would probably call this an undetermined fire. The cause of the fire is undetermined. Do you disagree with that opinion? Do you think it's only a matter of opinions?
Yes, I disagree with him.
You still think that
Yes, I
this
disagree.
is scientific evidence supporting
Yes,
arson?
yes. And I think I pointed that out earlier in my statement, that in looking over the top, which is a whole different other thing, they didn't discuss falling. They didn't discuss crazy glass. They discussed those issues that we looked at on the board. You know, were those poor patterns. And I might add, the caveat here, and again, I may get myself in trouble, just like science has changed the way we do things and think of things and can add and make us better. So has the legal community. So has just about any other community. And I don't want to be critical of the attorneys that handled the case back then, but they could have done a better job. They could have, had they been more educated. If you'd have had trained attorneys on each side, you know, on each side that knew fire science and had tried cases before on that, and you had the two experts on each side, you'd gone on that trial for weeks on those issues.
So let me understand you well. What you are contending is that you fault them for gravity as far as the report writing is concerned, but you still stand behind them and you still consider the conclusions that they reached are correct and scientifically sound.
I believe that the conclusions that they reached
based on current standards,
can be scientifically sound.
can be or are.
I can't say with an absolute that they are. I mean, I wasn't there. I mean, I would prefer if we could go back and look and examine those scenes. We're looking at photographs. You know? That's it. That's what we have to go by.
In a letter that the commission received from the state agency with the fire marshal's office, I think there was a statement made, and correct me if I don't say it correctly, that you stand behind the investigation that was conducted in 1991 and that you would reach the same conclusion if given the same set of circumstances. Is that what you're finding today?
And that's pretty much what our position is today. And let me go back and state that I think one of the things that's a shortcoming that I've seen today is the standard and the criticism that being leveled to us has not been set back. Where are their scientific methodology that tests their conclusions? They've thrown up hypotheticals. A 1-year-old child starting a fire. Are we dealing with probabilities, possibilities there? are we?
That's why I'm determined it
Are-
exists in
are-
those instances where you're unable to be
Are,
specific.
are we dealing with, okay, the individuals said they tested the electrical system, they looked at the lines, they looked for shorts. Are we calling them liars now, or are we saying we don't have sufficient information, that he doesn't, that I don't, that you don't, you do? What are we saying at that point? The gas was off. The mysterious third person that could have come in the door. We used to run a joke in the old days about the bird that picked up the cigarette and dropped it down the fireplace and started the fire. You can come up with hypotheticals, but again, weigh them out, test them. Test them, test them. Where has the testing been of their hypotheticals that have been raised? Where has that testing been? The media hasn't tested them. The media is going to take and run. We killed an innocent man. That's what they're looking at.
In the case of Mr. Vasquez and his findings, it seems like even though there wasn't a codified, uniform standard of practice at that time, he, on the other hand, fully understood flashover because he testified he knew what it was. He also said that the pattern could be produced by some other means other than an accelerant. He understood that. It seemed to me he had had quite a bit of that education and training about the investigation of fires because he used several of the methods that were later put into the 921.
Not only him, but the other, Mr. Paul.
But you stand by his the conclusion that the decision that was made was sound and just, even though Mr. Vasquez said no, this pattern in the floor could have been caused by some other means. He understood that and recognized it as an investigator.
Well, I think what he was saying is that as we put it out in 921 says that flashover could have been caused by what? Drop down. Was there drop down in this instance? You saw that ceiling. There wasn't any evidence of drop down. You saw the testimony of Mr. Falk.
But there are multiple causes besides drop down. I'm not a fire investigator.
Well, and I'm looking at that, we're looking at 921, well, let's talk about flashover. Let's talk about that flashover. What are they? Those patterns. They went to the extent, they haven't, they I guess, minimized the investigation or didn't read it, but they went to the extent, I know the Corsicana Fire Department investigation went to the extent of looking at where the toys had melted for things and identifying clothing and looking at those different patterns. Again, flashover, the occurrence of flashover doesn't mean you would never say that accelerant was used. And I
Mr.
think
Salazar,
that was indicated.
Mr. Salazar, I think one of the things that gets complicated in a case like this is that the experts who look at this and review it are once removed from the scene that the fire investigators had. They were on scene. I think we'd all agree that actually being there, interviewing the people face to face, seeing things, at least theoretically, gives you a better set of data than reading it from someone else. The other part of this that concerns me, and I'd like to hear your comments on it, because you're not only familiar with the arson field, but are a lawyer and understand how things happen in the courtroom, is much of the information that these experts are jumping to these conclusions about are the result of questions that are being asked by lawyers in a courtroom. Questions such as, does flashover, have other causes? Well, yes, it does. Jumping then to the conclusion, well, he didn't eliminate those causes. Do you see the use of a trial record as causing any problems in understanding what these investigators did?
It absolutely. I hope I pointed that out earlier. We as attorneys have a large say-so in what ultimately comes out in the trial. If I ask a certain questions, I can lead it down, and if counsel on the other side isn't articulate enough, knowledgeable enough to know how to get back to where he wants to go, it's a game that's played back and forth, and I don't mean to play it, it's a game. It's our legal system. It's the way we operate. And it may be unfortunate, but it is the best system we have. Are there ways to improve it? Yes, there are.
So if for example, the defense attorney had asked the question, of Mr. Vasquez. Mr. Vasquez, isn't it possible that a bird did in fact pick up a cigarette off of the street, fly over that chimney, drop it down, and it started a fire? His answer could well be yes, that's possible.
As a truthful matter, he would have to say of the possibility of it happening, yes. It is.
Would you then think that that becomes an alternate hypothesis that should defeat a conclusion that this is arson?
Depends on if you've got an agenda or not. No. As a scientist,
Okay,
as
now,
a
well, how are you
fact
eliminating
finder,
it? How are you eliminating it? Because you can't scientifically eliminate that.
just common sense and reason, cognitive reasoning, deduction, possibilities, probabilities.
One of the most interesting slides, and I think the slide that frankly is the most important piece of information that you gave up there, was from the 921 that talked about how ultimately every single investigator has to accumulate data and form a conclusion from it. And isn't that where differences of opinion come from?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So one investigator could well say, look, in my experience, it is ridiculous to think that a cigarette dropped down that fireplace. I don't see anything here that even remotely suggests it, and it's an event that is very unlikely to occur, so I'm not really going to discard arson on that basis. Another expert might say, you know, I'm being paid a lot of money from a defendant, and all I have to say is, yeah, I think that's possible. I can't exclude that. They're both right, aren't they?
They are, absolutely. And that's one of, again, getting back to the education side of it and transmitting that scientific knowledge back down. Most of the scientific research that's being done, and I believe they alluded to it, is being done over here on the high dollar level. You have large loss, you know, you're going to spend a lot of money fighting these insurance companies back and forth over here. It's not conducted down on a criminal case where somebody's been charged with arson. You don't go out and spend a bunch of money on experts. In the particular case here that we're talking about, the defense was authorized and went out and found an expert. He reviewed the information and concluded they were right. So that's 3 investigators that agreed at the time.
Can I just clarify, so your office re-reviewed all of those documents and went through everything, and the opinion as provided to the commission back in August would be that you would stand by the original opinions that were rendered, correct?
Yes, and that assumes that there isn't any additional, I think we've talked about, you know, bring us some additional information. Bring us a different hypothetical. Give us a different hypothetical that is reasonable, that is rational, that can be thought out and given some substance. And yes, my mind would change, Mr. Maldonado's mind would change, yes.
And when you reviewed those, the case, you were reviewing those same documents because you weren't there at the time, correct?
Absolutely.
Right, so you're reviewing essentially the same documents that other experts have reviewed as they reviewed this case. And so we've had a number of scientific experts that have reviewed this case based on the documents that have been highly critical of the investigation. Drs. DeHaan, Dr. Byler, Dr. Lentini, Dr. Hurst. Would you disagree with all of that criticism?
Well, I'm not sure. You're going to have to point out which criticism. I've heard a lot of criticism. You know, I've heard from Dr. Baylor, you know, he wrote we were doing voodoo. You know, yes, I would absolutely. He said there was absolutely no standard that he complied with, either current standard or their standard. Yes, I would vehemently disagree with that. Would I disagree with Mr. Lantini's characterization that 80% of the fire investigators in the country are a bunch of yahoos? Yes, I would disagree with that. Yes, what specifically am I disagreeing with or agreeing with?
I'm just wondering if any of the criticism that's been provided that the office would agree with, or do you absolutely stand by the original opinion?
No, I think we started out by saying, you know, the reports that were written, the report that was written by our employee, Mr. Vasquez, left much to be desired, I think. We would agree to that. It included maybe superfluous information that given the knowledge that we have now, should have not been included. It probably didn't include enough dialogue on certain information that should have been expanded on. Would have been helpful. But to assume that, you know, just automatically, again, like, you know, I've heard, you know, Mr. Perwani, I think you made a statement, making a speech somewhere, I read it in the newspaper, or we used bad science and everything was wrong. Well, let's be a little specific. What bad science was used? The science that ultimately that conclusion right now, again, I think I pointed out, you can try the case today and have experts on both sides, and go on for days, particularly if you have good attorneys.
I guess one of the issues that the commission might have is that we don't have an expert that has actually looked at that and would render the opinion that they would support the original conclusions that were made back in 1991, because all of the experts that have looked at it have made, have been quite critical of the investigation. So I realize that in any case you're going to have different opinions, but I don't think we have that opposing opinion from someone who is a qualified fire investigator or fire science expert that's saying, yes, I would look at this case and I would absolutely agree with it, other than perhaps the state fire marshal, or am I wrong?
Well, I'm not sure. I haven't talked to, other fires, but we haven't gone out and solicited. We haven't gone out and attempted to find somebody or hire somebody. I know I've talked with a lot of fire investigators. I know I've talked with members of the IAA, authority, presidents and things of that nature, people that are up, and they're all concerned about the nature because they believe that we are correct. We believe that there's motives, and people are, going a little extraneous, a little far. I mean, the whole point of saying, just saying, well, explaining away the fact an accelerant is found at the threshold, and just saying, well, they used to cook out in the front yard, and saying, well, that's an explanation, therefore that hypothetical, therefore that's gone out the window. So all you can't determine that those were still evidence of an accelerant. There's no treatise, there's no book that says that.
Any other questions?
Well, I have a question. With the accelerant at the door, I think that there was a misunderstanding that the witnesses had been, interviewed. And they were thinking that they didn't know that the door was intact during part of where the witnesses had come up. It wasn't completely burned away when they got there. And I think they were kind of thinking that your office didn't know that, Vasquez didn't know that. But they did know that because they talked to the witnesses, so they knew the door was intact and that this accelerant was found under the door, basically.
Right.
Right? And then later, as the fire progressed, it burned the door down.
Right. It doesn't necessarily mean there was, in fact, the liquor that was found, it wasn't gasoline. It wasn't like, somebody poured gasoline, the allegation somebody poured gasoline to light a fire. Blow up. That wasn't the case. That wasn't the case. The allegation was that in the context of, let's say, Mr. Vasquez said there were multiple points, maybe that was not a correct assessment of what transpired or what the evidence shows. The evidence did show the connection and the possibility. Now, once the fire reached a certain stage, once the front windows were broken out by the defendant, there was a huge devastation of fire. And then ultimate testimony says that ultimately there was somewhat of an explosion that took place, which probably was the flashover. There's been some discussion by some people that I've talked to that indicate, well, maybe flashover really didn't because, and they look at different factors. But I think it begs the point because ultimately there was full room involvement, which is the real point. I think Mr. Nahan alluded to, when you have the flashover, there's a possibility of that low burn. It also can be evidence of that there was some liquor down there. There's just so many areas in the fire investigation area that it's difficult to just say you're dealing with absolutes. I have one quote here that I just love, where it talks in terms of, so while it's true that accelerants make fire burn more rapidly, a rapidly burning fire does not necessarily indicate an accelerant. 921 is wrapped, just full of that kind of language. that leaves it up to interpretation, cumulative thinking, putting together, and coming up with an opinion.
So basically what the fire marshal's office is contending and opining that in fact the natural causes and accidental causes were in fact excluded.
Yes.
And that in fact,
Yes.
by exclusion, therefore this is also.
Well, as we noted up there, by exclusion, it said, in 921, again, it says, if you eliminate all natural causes, now is that possible? I think Dr. Rahman indicated, right, he did agree, you could eliminate them all. I'm not sure you can. I think you indicated that possibly. But 921 will tell you can eliminate all the possible emission sources. You got a tough job in front of you trying to make it, unless you've got what? A positive indicator. And we had the positive indicator. There was the positive indicator. So even 921 tells you today that that's a reasonable cause.